Let me first give all praise and all honor to the God of my ancestors, the God of Africa, the Almighty Amun-Ra. This is your brother Radio 1 coming back at you again with another video of truth and historical reality. Now the name of this video is Deuteronomy 28:68 happened to Hamite Africans, not Israelites. Prophecy versus historical reality. Yes, that's what we're going to be talking about today. And yes, it is just another day of me educating and talking some common sense into the dumb and delusional. Yes, because many of our people are delusional. So let us start with prophecy. Prophecy is not historical reality. Okay? Prophecy is a prediction or something that is predicted and has not come to pass yet. Historical reality is something that already came to pass. It's a reality that already happened. It already came to pass. And there is more truth in historical reality than there is in prophecy. Yes, historical reality is the truth. Prophecy is uncertain because it has not come to pass. There is a difference between prophecy and historical reality. Now, for example, it could be prophesied that Mike Tyson is going to go in the ring and beat the hell out of Buster Douglas. But the reality was Mike Tyson got in the ring and got knocked the hell out by Buster Douglas. It could be prophesied that Nipsey Hussle will live a long age of 100 years. But the reality is he died at the age of 33. It could be prophesied that Barack Obama will become president and do a lot of good things for black people. But the reality is when he became president, he did nothing for black people. He ignored and turned his back on black people. That is the reality. Okay? So when we deal with prophecy or Deuteronomy 28, okay? The prophecy is the Israelites will go back into Egypt a second time in ships and will be sold as slaves and no one shall buy them. That is the prophecy. But the reality for black Americans in the Atlantic slave trade is Negro Africans or Hamites were taken from West Africa, brought to America one time, not a second time, one time in ships, and there they were sold as slaves and they were bought. That is the reality. So this reality, slaves being brought into ships, happened to West Africans, not Israelites. Okay? Let's make that very clear. Yes, the prophecy says the Israelites will be taken on ships as slaves to Egypt a second time, and they will be offered for sale, but no one shall buy them. That is the prophecy. The reality is West Africans were brought to America one time, not a second time, on ships as slaves to America, and they were offered for sale and they were bought. That is the reality. And that reality belongs to West Africans or the ancestors of black Americans. It happened to West Africans, or what the Hebrew Israelites call Hamites. Yes, that is the reality of that. Now, when we deal with historical reality, Hebrew Israelites, white supremacists, please let history be. If history says the ancient Egyptians were black Africans, leave it be. Let it stop trying to change it into what you want it to be, because you can't accept it for what it is. That is the historical reality. Okay? That already came to pass. The Greeks saw the Egyptians and they called them black. And they said they were Africans. They were native to Africa. But you, because you can't accept the historical reality, you want to change it and say that the Egyptians were not black Africans. They were white Caucasians. You know what I call that? I call that tampering with history. Yes, that is tampering with, stop tampering with history. The historical reality is the reality that already happened. You cannot debunk it because it already happened. You can never refute the older in the original history or the historical reality. Hebrew Israelites, if history says that the slaves taken from Africa and brought to America were Negro Hamites, leave it at that. If it says they were African Hamites, leave it at that. Stop trying to change those Negro Africans or Hamites into Hebrew Israelites because you can't accept the historical reality. That is the historical reality. Accept it, deal with it, live with it. Because you're making yourself look bad and you're making yourself look like a fool and you're making yourself look like a fraud trying to tamper with it and change it into what you want it to be. That is the historical reality. Leave it be. You should honor it and you should respect what the ancients left behind. And stop trying to tamper with history. That is the problem with Americans or with people in general today. They don't want to accept history for what it is. So what they do, they make up their own history and they also tamper with real history to make it fit to what they want it to be. And that is wrong. That's not right. And if I ever catch you doing it, I'm going to call you out. Yes. So when you see me, you better run. Yes. Because I am here to protect and defend the history of my ancestors. I'm here to protect and defend the history of the greatness and the glory and the monuments and the pyramids of my ancestors. And that's what I'm here to do. And I'm not going to let you lie about them. Like I said before, I'm not going to let you turn the Negroes, my Negro ancestors, into something they are not. Okay? So let's move on. Okay, we're going to be real quick. So let me also first say that the prophecies in Deuteronomy 28 can happen to any race of people, not just Hebrew Israelites or not just the biblical Israelites. Okay? It says that, the Israelites will be afflicted with blindness and disease and they will go into captivity. That can happen to anyone. That can happen to any race of people. Any people that is conquered by another nation, those things will happen to them. But let's move on. Okay? So we're going to go to Deuteronomy 28:68. We're going to deal with that and we're going to move on. We're going to make it real quick. So when we go to Deuteronomy 28:68, it says, "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. By the whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more." Okay? Again. "And there you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you." Okay, it says, "The Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships." Okay? That's the prophecy. The prophecy says the Israelites will be brought into Egypt again with ships. But what is the reality for the Atlantic slave trade? Yes, West Africans, not Israelites, were taken from West Africa and brought to America in ships as slaves one time. Okay? Not from Israel to Egypt, but from America to West Africa. One time. Not back and forth as the prophecy says. And the prophecy says, yes, and there And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. That is the prophecy. The Israelites shall be sold to their enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, but no man shall buy them. That is the prophecy. What is the reality for black Americans? Okay, West Africans were brought to America and sold to their enemies as slaves, and they were bought. Yes, that is the reality. So the prophecy is saying they were sold unto their enemies, but they were not bought. But our reality is saying, yes, we were bought. So we see here that the prophecy in Deuteronomy 28:68 is different from the reality of the Atlantic slave trade in black Americans. Yes. So if you're going to say that that prophecy came to pass of slaves being brought on ships, you're going to have to admit that it happened to Africans, not Israelites. Okay? It happened to Africans. And it is a different story that is told in the Bible. Okay? Our reality, the reality of the Atlantic slave trade, is a different story than the prophecy that is told in Deuteronomy 28:68. That is the difference between prophecy and history. Okay? So a prophecy, if history says that the ancient Egyptians were black, leave it at that. If history says that the people who were put on ships as slaves and brought to America were Negroes, African Hamites, leave it at that. It is what it is. That is the reality. So I'm going to touch on one more thing, then I'm going to end it. Okay? I'm going to show you how some of the curses that are mentioned in Deuteronomy 28 came to pass on the Songhai people, on the people of the Songhai Empire. Yes, the people of the Songhai Empire were also the ancestors of black Americans. Yes, because the Songhai Empire was in West Africa. Okay? We're not in Egypt. Okay? We're not in Sudan. We're not in East Africa. We're in West Africa now. Okay? And the Songhai Empire was in the interior part of West Africa on the Niger River. And they ruled all of the Niger River. And they were very powerful. And keep in mind, the Songhai people and the Songhai kings, the Hebrew Israelites called them Hamites. Yes, they said the Songhai people were Hamites who sold Israelites into slavery. That's what they said about them. But what they don't tell you is, okay, those Songhai, the power of the Songhai also came to an end. The Songhai were also conquered and made slaves. Yes, that's what we're going to get off into. Okay? But some of you already know about the Songhai Empire, and so far as them being slaves, being the Songhai selling Israelite slaves, yes, they had slaves, but those slaves were not Israelites. Those slaves were other Africans. Yes, some of those slaves were even descendants of the Ghana and Mali Empire. They don't tell you that. Yes. Those slaves were other Africans. So the Songhai was selling other Africans into slavery. That is the historical reality. Okay? They were not Israelites. The Israelite mention is a myth. Okay? But I'm going to show you here. We're going to deal with Deuteronomy 28, chapter 30. And I'm going to show you how this prophecy happened to the Songhai people. So, let's go here, okay? Yes, it goes on to say, Deuteronomy 28:30. It says, thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build an house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. It says, thou shalt build an house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. I'm going to show you what happened during the Songhai Empire. Okay? And it goes on to say, at the beginning, I'm going to deal with it again. It said that Judar was a general that was sent by the king of Morocco to conquer the Songhai Empire. Yes, this is when the Songhai Empire was conquered by the Moroccans of the Saidi dynasty. And they conquered the Songhai Empire with guns and explosive and cannons. And the Songhai people had arrows and spears and shields, but it was no match for the guns of the Moroccans. And it took place in the 1600s AD. And it said Judar went to meet the jurist Qadi Umar ibn Muhammad, and after entering his home, he lowered his feet, seated himself in front of him, and showed a great friendliness. Then he said, I have come to ask you to loan us a house for our lodging. So it's saying that Judar came into the Songhai Empire and was asking for a house. Okay, this is the Tariq al-Fatah's Timbuktu Chronicles, page 268. But then it goes on to say on page 270, okay, the Timbuktu Chronicles, page 270, it says, on the morning of the 7th day, the Moroccans abruptly came before the doors of their houses, carrying their luggage on their horses. The Moroccans swept down upon the inhabitants, heaping injuries, threats, and blows upon them, and compelling them to empty their houses through the use of force and violence. Then they divided the houses between themselves, entering them at the same time that the owners were expelled. So we see here, it says that the Moroccans, okay, divided the houses between themselves, entering them at the same time that the owners were expelled. So it's saying that the Moroccans kicked the Songhai people out of their houses and dwelled in them. Okay, which is what the Bible said Deuteronomy 28:30, thou shalt build a house, but ye shall not dwell in it. Okay, proving my point that these curses can happen to anybody. And we just saw here that it happened to the Songhai people. But let's move on. And I'm going to close it out after this. Okay, so let's go to Deuteronomy 28. Chapter 41, and it says, Deuteronomy 28:41, thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. That's what it says in Deuteronomy 28:41. So let's go back to the Timbuktu Chronicles again. Okay, and it says in the Timbuktu Chronicles, yes. Okay, Timbuktu Chronicles, page 287. And it says, this is where the last calamities, okay, let's read from the beginning. This is where Mahmud was a general that was sent by the king of Morocco to conquer the Songhai. It says, this is where Mahmud entrapped the majority of the brothers of the Askil, the king of Songhai, who had embraced the party of Nu. This is where the last calamities that befell the Songhai took place, destroying the cohesion that had once held them together, dispersing them into many different directions. Deuteronomy 28 also mentions that. Dispersing them into many different directions. The day that they were overcome by the Pasha Mahmud is called the day of Waim. It is the day that their blood was spilled and their children were taken into captivity. Okay, so we see here, according to the Timbuktu Chronicles, the children of the Songhai people were taken into captivity by the Moroccans. Okay, showing, okay, when it says Deuteronomy 28:41, thou shalt beget children, but thou shalt not enjoy them, but they shall be taken into captivity, happened to the Songhai people of West Africa. Yes, that is the historical reality. And I may do a video soon showing how those prophecies can happen to anybody. They can happen to any race of people. Okay? It doesn't make you a Hebrew Israelite. If it happens to you, you still are who you are. It just, that type of thing just happened to you. Okay? Stop listening to these lying, pseudo fake and fraudulent, delusional Hebrew Israelites. They have been debunked so many times, and we are on the siege. Yes, we have them besieged. And they're going to have to surrender and submit and admit to their lies and admit that they are wrong. I know that's a hard thing for you to do, but you're going to have to do it. Okay? And Hebrew Israelites and white supremacists. Okay? Stop acting like whining babies. Okay? That's how you act like. You act like whine, whining babies. Whining crybabies. Trying to change history because history doesn't agree with you. You want to have it your way. Whine. No, we not Africans. We Hebrew Israelites. That's a lie. That's what the history says. You're going to have to accept it for what it is. So stop crying like a whining baby and accept the historical reality for what it is. Okay? So we're going to close it out from there. Okay? Proving that the prophecy in Deuteronomy 28 of the Israelites is different from the reality of black Americans in the Atlantic slave trade. Yes. Okay? When it speaks of slaves going into ships, that is something that happened to the West Africans, not to Israelites. The slaves in West Africa. It happened to them. Now, if it happened to some Jews who were living in Israel or anywhere else during that time, then you can say, well, yeah, that happened to the Israelites. No, but it happened to West Africans. That is our reality. We have to accept it for what it is, deal with it, own up to it, and move on. And with that said, this is your brother Radio 1, closing out. Coming back at you again with another video of historical reality, of truth and historical reality. And until next time, Egypt stays in Africa. Peace and Amun Ra.